I'm Jessica Stutzman, and this is the Mill Creek Government Channel. Child abuse and neglect occurs throughout our community. In fact, a child you may know may be at risk. Viewers, you can help protect the children in our community by learning to recognize the signs of abuse and how to report suspected abuse. Joining us today from the Children's Advocacy Center is Executive Director Michael Gaines. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I love that we are having you on the show today. We were chatting before the camera started rolling that you haven't been on in about 10 years. We were yes. kind of guessing. So that is far too long, and I am so glad to have you back on. I want to cover for our viewers, what is the mission, a really important mission, of the Children's Advocacy Center?
Well, the Children's Advocacy Center, and by the way, we often shorten that to CAC just to make it easier. Its mission is to provide a child-friendly location where children who there's been an allegation that they may be being abused can come to speak to a well-trained forensic interviewer who can get an unbiased account of what it is they have or have not experienced. And also, we then can connect the family and the child with the helps and services in the community, reduce the trauma by having the child come for a recorded interview rather than having to be interviewed by multiple people. So our mission is to reduce trauma and to help children to be able to tell their story and be protected.
Wonderful. When did the Erie Children's Advocacy Center start?
Well, the origin of the CAC starts actually with District Attorney Brad Folk of happy memory, and of a number of other concerned people in the community, social workers, law enforcement, and others, who said back in the late 1990s, there's got to be a better way to work with these children when something is suspected. It's scary for a child to go talk to a police officer in the police department or to talk to somebody in an emergency room or something like that. So they started looking, they formed a task force and started looking around saying, what can we do? And after investigating the various things that are being done around the country, they settled on the Children's Advocacy Center model, which originated in Huntsville, Alabama, actually in the 1980s. So Erie CAC actually began in 2001.
Wonderful. Yeah. And what did that model, how did that model differ than, like you said, maybe an officer or a first responder or somebody in a cold room asking children scary questions? How did your model differ?
Well, there's a couple things that make it very different. One is simply that the setting. We have a child-friendly setting, and our lobby is comfortable, and it's quiet. There's not a lot of hubbub going on, so it takes the temperature down a bit, so to speak. And there's games and things for little ones, or coloring sheets, or just to make them relax and be comfortable. So that's one difference right off the bat. And then it's the matter of who's speaking to the child. If you have just randomly pick somebody out of whether it's law enforcement or Office of Children and Youth or the hospital, they may or may not be good at speaking with children. Some people are, some people aren't. Actually, it's not my gift, but there are those who are very good at it. And we have a couple well-trained forensic interviewers, they're called. They're trained in developmentally appropriate speaking, so they can talk to the children in a way that makes sense. You talk to a 5-year-old differently than you talk to a 10-year-old, differently than you talk to a 15-year-old. And they'll do what's appropriate in a way to elicit the child's unbiased account of whatever it is they did or did not experience, because sometimes an allegation turns out to be true and sometimes it turns out to be mistaken. So.
And can you tell me a little bit about your team? You cover all of Erie County. How many employees do you have?
The CAC does cover all of Erie County, and we have 4 full-time and 2 part-time employees. We employ 1 forensic interviewer, and she's been doing this since actually 2004. We have what's called a family care coordinator. Then we have a person who kind of backs up the family care coordinator and also tries to make communication happen between various agencies with our what's called a multidisciplinary team, which I'll speak about a little bit. And then we have myself, who tries to just, as I always say, I try to keep the lights on and the doors open and things like that, We have a couple part-time people, one whose specialty is prevention, and we're trying to ramp up our prevention activities. And somebody tries to help us with some of our development because it takes resources in order to do any of these things.
Right, right. Resources, funding, and I know we want to talk about all of that. So you did speak to the multidisciplinary team. How does that approach look different in responding to the child?
The multidisciplinary team, first of all, is made up of representatives of the district attorney's office, law enforcement, the Office of Children and Youth, medical providers, mental health providers, the Crime Victim Center, and other agencies that deal with children. We come together at least monthly, and we look at all the cases, say what happened, what was going on, what does this child need? Maybe this particular child, this family seems like they need a referral to mental health. Maybe everyone, if the case is going forward, need to talk to the Crime Victim Center. And just how can we help this family and this child go through this process? Because the whole criminal justice process is difficult and scary for adults, let alone children.
Right.
And without the multidisciplinary team, I mean, we've got great people who work on all those agencies, but each one's focused on what their little piece of the pie is. So if you're an investigator, you want your investigation to go well, or if you're a medical person, you want to take care of the medical needs, and that's what you should be concerned about. But we try to bring them all together so that we get a holistic picture of the child and the family, and maybe by seeing the whole, it can help the parts be taken care of better.
Absolutely, and I think you just touched on why this approach is so important. I mean, it's crucial to the success, the outcome, and the future of that child.
Absolutely. You know, if a child is abused, that can affect their future performance in school. It can affect their self-image. It can affect so many things in their lives. Untreated trauma of any sort, whether it's from abuse or anything else, can derail somebody's life. We often hear of people trying to self-medicate and getting into drugs or alcohol, or we hear of people becoming angry and all those sort of things. Part of our job is to try to make sure these children get help they need so that they don't have those bad outcomes, that they can be given every opportunity to heal and to overcome whatever the trauma in their life is to go forward.
And that's you know, you spoke of the trauma and what can come from that. You know, we just interviewed a different organization on eating disorders and how the trauma can lead to childhood trauma or adult trauma can lead to eating disorders. And I think that's just one of the layers of, you know, what you're trying to prevent from happening.
Actually, when we're talking about symptoms and signs that a child may possibly be a victim of abuse, eating disorders is one of those general signs that says there's something going on. It may not be abuse, it might be abuse, but there's something. So the question is, what's the something? And hopefully people will take note. So that's a very good connection, yes.
Yeah, of course. So who funds the work of the CAC?
The answer to that is we have, first of all, for cases that involve the Office of Children and Youth, they do pay us a fee per service for doing our part of the investigation. So that comes from the state through the county. We also get some grant money, and we do apply for grants as they become available. It's harder to find grants for an agency that just covers a single county as opposed to something that is much broader. But we do find some, and we do that. But there's a good, between 30 and 50% of our budget is either by generous donations of the people of our county or by fundraising events that we have.
Oh, and what fundraising events do you do?
Well, we have an annual dinner every year, usually somewhere in April, May, which is April's Child Abuse Prevention Month. So we try to have it somewhere in that neighborhood. Depends a little bit on when Easter falls and things of how we can actually schedule it. And we also have a golf outing. It's traditionally been sometime in the summer. It depends on the scheduling of with the golf course and things. But those are our two largest fundraisers. And then we have an annual appeal, and we have this and that. We actually sadly, we tried to have a Halloween gathering, but we had to cancel it because we didn't get enough reservations to cover the cost.
Oh no, well, maybe that's something with our show we could, help push, participants, because again, you're doing such important work with, the youth and the children of our community. We want to make sure that they all stay safe, and that actually leads me into my next question. How can we keep our children safe? What can members of the community do? What can parents do? What can family members do? Tell us what to look out for and how to help.
I love that question because so often we have a very narrow view of where children are in danger. Like I know when I was a kid, I was warned about don't talk to the stranger in the park, don't go with somebody that you don't know, those sort of things. Right. Well, that's good advice. My parents weren't wrong, but quite honestly, that accounts to less than 10% of the abuse, those type of situations.
Yes.
Now, I mean, if somebody is doing something like that, law enforcement will respond immediately to make sure the children are safe and to try to find who's out there trying to, lure kids away. But most abuse, between 85 and 93%, according to the statistics, but most abuse occurs at the hands of someone the child knows and trusts. Oftentimes it's somebody in the family. Maybe it can be a parent. It can be a parent's paramour in situations where parents are separated or split. It could be another family member, uncle, cousin, aunt, grandparent. And I should note, by the way, that abuse is perpetrated about equally by men and women. Wow. So oftentimes, again, we have this image that it's always some creepy guy somewhere. No, it isn't. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. If it were that easy, we'd go find them all and do something. But it's anybody, and you don't know who that somebody is. So how do you keep your kids safe? First of all, you pay attention to the situations your kids are in. If somebody seems to be paying inordinate attention to your child that it doesn't seem right, it probably isn't.
So that gut feeling,
feeling.
Something's wrong here and I need to have my...
Whether, again, I don't want to pick any given occupation because I don't want to stigmatize anybody, but if there's somebody who's suddenly taken an interest in your child doesn't have that relationship, why? Maybe it's innocent, but maybe it's not. We want to make sure that we know, again, who our children are with, the setting they're in. We want to listen to them and see them. If the child who's been gregarious and outgoing suddenly becomes quiet and sullen, what's happening? Maybe it's abuse, maybe it's something else, but what's happening? If a child who is quiet and been kind of shy suddenly becomes, boisterous, what caused that change?
And I think it's good to ask those questions, like you just said, regardless of abuse. There's something going on with my child. Absolutely. I need to start asking questions, regardless of abuse.
Absolutely. It may or may not be abuse, but what is it?
Yeah.
There's something caused a change in that child. Why? If a child, especially a young child, tells you that somebody's done something to them, believe them and have it checked out. I mean, it's rare that a young child particularly makes up a story. I mean, maybe somebody who's close to being an adult might tell a tale if they want to get somebody in trouble, but rarely does a young child. And another thing, young children typically, and I say typically anymore because with the internet and things, it's not as black and white as it used to be, but typically young children are rather naive about, sexual things and things like that. And the question becomes, if a child seems to have a whole lot of knowledge beyond their age, beyond their years, where's that coming from? And again, maybe it's not abuse, but maybe it is. And what's happening, you know your child. So what can you do as a community member? There, again, if you see somebody who seems to be, bothering children, tell somebody in authority. If you see, things that just, again, that gut feeling, something doesn't seem right here, tell someone. I'd rather have 10 reports that turn out to be nothing than miss the one report that really was a child in danger.
Right. Yeah. Right, exactly. And, and I think, are there certain questions we should be asking, I guess our children, when they come home from school or come back from a friend's house, are there certain is there a way to start that conversation
You know,
So they want to open up to you? Because sometimes they would be
Right.
uncomfortable
Right.
sharing it or repeating it.
yeah, I would, first of all, before there's anything ever happens, build that relationship with your child, and you can always talk to me, you can tell me anything, and show them that when they do tell you, whether it's some dumb little thing that happened at school, whatever, that you're interested, so that'll encourage them to tell you if it's something that isn't dumb. In terms of questioning, I wouldn't. I mean, that if there's nothing going on and you start asking questions, what you do then is run the risk of traumatizing the child in a way that the child's fine and he doesn't need. And the other side of that is people who don't know what they're doing asking questions can make it impossible for the authorities to pursue a case if there is something going on, because I always say, even we tell the first responders, you ask open-ended things like, are you okay? What's happening? You don't ask something specific, we always use the example of somebody saying, did your brother do that to you? You never ask that way, because now you've suggested that the brother is somebody who does something to them.
That makes perfect sense.
You want to say, oh, you've got a bruise. How did that happen? And let them tell you.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to talk about the plans for the future of the Children's Advocacy Center.
For 22 years now, the center has been responding to incidents of child abuse. And I think we do a fairly good job of working with our partner agencies and trying to help these children and trying to get them connected when families cooperate. And it's always up to the family to cooperate. But we see, and the board of directors of the agency, because we're a nonprofit and we have a board, and they said, is there a way that we can do something to help before abuse? I mean, we've spent 22 years responding after the abuse, and we've seen over 5,000 kids from Erie County in that period of time. That's a lot of kids to be wondering or worrying about being abused. Is there a way to get on the front end? So we want to start ramping up efforts at prevention. Now, there's some other agencies in town that do prevention of child abuse activities, and we have no intention of duplicating anything they're doing. But what we want to do is see what's being done in town, in Erie County. Where are the gaps? What are the evidence-based programs out there that might address the needs that we're seeing, and how do we bring them to Erie County? Now, in order to do that, it's going to take some resources. It's going to take some funding. I probably need another staff person or two along the way, not right away, but eventually, if we can get this ramped up. So I'm hoping that our citizenry will help us in that area, because again, we do what we do to try to help our children, and we count on everyone else to help us help the children.
Absolutely. And I don't know, I might have said it in my intro, but is there maybe a definition of abuse or neglect, or something where you use as the model and guide to say, like, this has crossed the line, this is too far?
Well, legally, there's certainly definitions of abuse. They can, anytime that a child suffers a hurt, an injury that is, not an accident, anytime somebody invades a child's person in a sexual way that's not welcomed or appropriate, that's abuse. Neglect is a little harder sometimes, because it almost takes a medical person to tell you if you really have neglect, or if you just have a child who happens to be smaller than usual, or maybe they have a medical condition. But again, if you the lack of certain things. I mean, some people think of a child has lice, for example, that is neglect. Not necessarily. I mean, that happens, unfortunately, and sometimes parents and families are trying very hard to remedy that. So we shouldn't jump to conclusions that people are neglected. But again, if we see children who aren't getting food, who are out, walking to school in the winter and they don't have any winter clothing, or even that they're not going to school, well, then we have to ask, are they being properly taken care of? And again, it may not be neglect, but it should be looked at. Oftentimes it becomes a matter for the public of saying, I'm concerned about something, I'll tell somebody. And then those people who are trained can go take a look. and that makes all the difference.
And then who should they tell? Should they contact your office? Should they call the school? Should they call the police?
Well,
like, do they tell a mandated reporter? How does that work?
Well, if they think that it's abuse, if they think a child is physically or sexually being abused or something, gives them the first place to call is Childline. State of Pennsylvania has a child line. 1-800-932-0313
You have it memorized.
I do. You can also do it at keepkidssafe.pa.gov. That's the first response. If a child's in immediate danger, if you see something going on where a child, it looks like they might call law enforcement, call 911 for that. If it's not immediate danger, then it depends on the situation. It might be something where you tell the school. If it's a school situation, it might be something where you call the non-emergency line for the law enforcement or for OCY, Office of Children and Youth. Don't call us because actually to come to the CAC for anything, you have to be sent by law enforcement, the district attorney's office, the Office of Children and Youth, somebody in authority who's doing an investigation.
Okay.
Because we don't just interview kids off the street. That would be traumatic in its own right, and we're not going to add to the trauma.
Right.
We want to reduce it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
Are there any other ways, and our show's just coming to a close here, are there any other ways that something maybe that you didn't already mention for the community to get involved or just support your organization?
Well, we're always, if anyone's interested in volunteering to maybe help us with one of our fundraising events, or if there's somebody who has an ability, like maybe there's a retired teacher that would like to teach a prevention class or something like that, we're always interested in having people contact us to say, I'd like to volunteer, how can I help? And maybe today I don't have something, but maybe a month from now I do. So, it's... anytime, any connection like that, and of course, anyone who wants to contribute to us will always, I'll take that.
Yes, of course. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show here today. I learned so much. I'm so glad we got to have you back on the Mill Creek Government Channel talking about this because, like I said, it's really just so important to keep the children of our community safe.
It's been my delight to be here. I always like to be able to speak to our community at large, and this opportunity for Mill Creek to speak to the Mill Creek community is I think a wonderful thing that you have this going on. So we appreciate very much being included. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Viewers, again, we learned a lot about the Children's Advocacy Center, how they help our community, and I think the most important takeaway message is pay attention, pay attention to what your children say, pay attention to, the children of the community, and if you think you need to report something, it's better that you do that, than have something go unnoticed. So I want to thank you for tuning into the Mill Creek Government Channel, and until next time, have a great day.